Well, Joe, it's time for another retro review. Have you have you gone back and practiced the game known as Paper Mario?
Yes, I have. I've spent some time with Origami Mario, relearning his ways and attempting to speed run until my fingers just got tired of flipping him round and round and round to make him twirl faster. Yes.
The only way to travel. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I absolutely love this game, and there'll be a little bit of a personal story. But for those of you who are listening to the audio only program, you might notice in the video that there is a third person joining us this evening. And once again, we've brought my brother Nathan to the show. Nate, how are we doing tonight?
Doing good. I am halfway through packing up a car to come and see you. So, kind of, you and others.
Just say,
So,
yeah, try to make it seem like it's a unique trip just to see me. We
Yeah.
know that's a
It's
lie.
not an exclusive Mark thing.
I would never
Mhm.
just make a trip just to see Mark. I mean, come on. This is Mark we're talking about here.
Well, there's a reason why we decided to pile you into the clown car tonight because for those of you who have listened to some of the previous episodes about video games, Nate is largely the reason why I got involved with RPGs. Like, if not for Nate being involved in my life, I might have found an RPG eventually, but it probably would have taken a lot more time. So this
Mhm.
whole journey with RPGs was largely around some of the Final Fantasy stuff. But Nate, you and I played a lot of the Mario RPG on the Super Nintendo, and I watched you play a lot of that game, which kind of got me going. So, I mean,
Well,
if
to
yeah,
tell the honest story, the only reason we ever got into Mario RPG, the original, was because we were staying down with our cousin's house in Los Angeles. And it was just one of the games he had that we were most interested in playing. And he had a Super Nintendo and we didn't. And so we'd be up there for a weekend and we just roll through and play 70 hours of games in like 7 days, something like that.
I was gonna say
So,
we're just through the sweat and the tears and all the greasy food that we were eating out of the Filipino playbook. It was fantastic.
oh yeah, well, laying on a
Mhm.
pillow that looked like Larry Bird. Yeah,
Was that a Larry Bird body pillow? I can't
it,
remember.
it was. It was like no, it's just one of those like mock-up. They had Jordans and stuff too, but he had for some he had
Mhm.
Larry Bird, and then he had this $150 pair of Penny Hardaway shoes right next to the bed. I was like,
Whoa.
"You're not gonna
Okay.
wear
So
these? You don't wear
wait.
these."
So this was legitimately like a Larry Bird body pillow, not like one of those like old like WWF like Macho
No,
Man
it
wrestling
was
buddies.
actually it was like one of the Macho Man wrestling buddies.
Okay,
Yeah, it
that's
did.
what I thought. It's like who? Why are we
Yeah.
body
No,
pillows? There's no way that fetish was going around in the early '80s, in the like '90s, 2000s. It's a
You
more
don't body
recent
up on
thing.
Bird. I tell you
Joe,
No.
personally.
don't
Mm-mm.
don't misunderstand. This Larry Bird did not have like an open O mouth or anything. It was just the it was just screen printed Larry Bird on a
This is
pillow.
long before OnlyFans.
Yeah,
Long before.
I'm gonna say
We don't do that
fetishists
here.
were the fetishists back then were still behind closed doors and they didn't quite have the outlet yet. So it was a little bit different time. But speaking of a different time, though, as Nate and I have talked about, we played the Mario RPG with which kind of opened up this whole lane of like possibilities for Mario that frankly nobody even really thought was possible, and so that was what led into the Paper Mario series, which would start roughly about 6 to 7 years after that first attempt. So it's a spiritual successor to the first one. For those of you who listened to our retro review a couple months ago, so not quite a continuation, but ultimately it is a very unique looking game. And Joe, you kind of alluded to that a little bit. Do you want to expand on why it looks so unique?
Well, it's interesting because like obviously this comes out after like Mario 64, and this is really interesting in that like you would think there would be a push to have more of these 3D open world nature games, considering just how well that game did, and so it borrows from that, but at the same time does not want to get rid of those 2D Mario side-scrolling roots that we used to have. So you do get this sandbox like RPG element of kind of a 2D esque side scroll, but you can go like forward and back a little bit in this in the world. But then you've got flat characters moving and traversing this very 3D world for a, like you said, unique experience that hadn't been done before this.
Yeah, I think for me that was part of the charm. Actually, was seeing just how different it was. So ultimately, we've got this different look. It's a 2D world, despite being 3D ish. Do we want to call it that 2.5 ish type of thing? Is that
2.5D. Mm-hmm.
yeah?
Yeah,
Keeping the
it was
metric
almost
system.
more. Yeah, it was. I mean, I think the charm of it there was you're talking about, and I think what you guys are getting to a little bit is you're talking about an era where everything's sort of advancing towards 3D. Because in their pure kind of games at the time, you're talking Donkey Kong Country or Super Mario 64. Everyone's going to
Mm-hmm.
3D, and here they are with the throwback, but it's still in kind of that same sort of 3D movement kind of operation, and
Mm-hmm.
allowed for a lot of flexibility in game creativity that you could have that within that kind of space. So I think it was an interesting art choice for
Mm-hmm.
sure because it was much different from what we expected. Considering I think the majority of us were expecting something more paper or Mario 64 ish.
Yeah, it's kind of the idea that I think Nintendo had is that everyone wanted to go in the 3D direction and no one wanted anyone to go in the 2D direction. And Nintendo was like,
They don't want us there, so we're going.
kind of.
Yeah,
You,
yeah.
Nintendo does this creative thing where they go and do something that when you see, it's almost like picking Heath Ledger to be the Joker. When you first hear about it, you go, "That's gonna suck,"
Mm-hmm.
and and it makes you a little bit resistant sometimes to pick it up and play it. But then when you finally get around to it, you realize there was really a lot of thought placed into that decision.
Mm-hmm.
They always tend to do a lot more with less, and so it wasn't initially my favorite or even one of my favorites, but it's one of the ones that I kind of grew to love.
Yeah. Speaking of growing to love a few things, one thing we do like to do on these retro reviews is kind of revisit the time in which this game came out or the games come out. So, in the world of 2000 and 2001, when we had Paper Mario coming out, we also had games like Counter-Strike coming out, little ditty called Baldur's Gate 2, something that we may have heard of and enjoyed, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. Fun story on that was definitely playing a demo of that at Best Buy. We're wearing a Make 7 Up Your shirt. And I had some guy standing behind me asking what game it was, and I was just so focused on it, didn't even hear him. So the thing I heard him say is like, "That's a pretty offensive shirt you have on there, man." I turned around and I'm like, "What are you talking about? Just make 7 Up yours."
Dude, seriously. I mean,
Yeah.
you were too busy playing Black Suit Spider-Man, on a
Yeah.
skateboard.
Ain't
And
nobody
I
got
mean,
time to answer these silly questions of his.
no, hell no.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-mm.
God, dude. Yeah, God, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, Nate, we spent countless hours breaking through walls and spamming the same moves just to unlock the next thing. I'm actually kind of shocked we're not replacing Paper Mario with that. But
I mean, give it time. There's a whole
yeah,
other season coming of the show, everyone.
I could manual for like 10 minutes after the level was supposed to be over off the
oh
course
yeah,
of like one trick, and
oh
you
yeah,
just quit because you need to go to the bathroom. Like it wasn't because you were
yeah,
really ready to finish. You're just like, I think I'm done right now.
yes.
I think I have to be done.
I have to
I don't
stop
want to
because
be
of
I'm
done.
good. I'm
bodily
good.
functions have stopped me from enjoying this playthrough. But yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, Joe, the other two that we had on this list that I was actually shocked I forgot was Resident Evil Code Veronica. I feel like that
Ooh.
game kind of falls into this like abyss of early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
But then we have Command and Conquer Red Alert 2, which I absolutely spent a ton of time with. And oddly enough, about 8 years after this, or maybe 6 years after this, it had like a revival and people were playing Red Alert 2 even like right around the end of my high school days. It was kind of interesting.
Oh.
But yeah. So it's a varied slate of games that came out around the same time, and it's
Mm-hmm.
funny that we're talking about Baldur's Gate 2 at a time when everyone's literally playing Baldur's Gate 3. So crazy staying power some of these titles have.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But one thing I do want to revisit, which is something that the producers of this game also wanted to do, was that the art style is reminiscent of the NES era of Super Mario, where you have Super Mario 3. And Nate, do you remember how Super Mario 3 was kind of introduced as far as just an aesthetic goes?
I mean, right from the outset of it, it looks like a stage play. As they're coming in,
Mm-hmm.
you got the curtain coming down and everything. And what they really achieved there was it's kind of that sliding effect. The sliding effect you would have is if you were sliding, two pieces of paper over each
Mm-hmm.
other. And that was really just because that's limitations of the system. And so, in a way, as I think Mark's alluding to, is it's kind of what they kind of tried to bring into
Mm-hmm.
Paper Mario was that same kind of concept, that same kind of charm. Because it's even Super Mario 3 this day is still very timeless for that
Yes.
reason.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
for the limitations of that system, it was. I mean, it's later on in the system's history, but it was definitely maxing out what that hardware could do, and knowing that Super Mario World was on the horizon, it still stood its own. Like it was still worth buying, despite the Super Nintendo coming out. So
Are you saying that even without Super Mario 1 and 2, that 3 stands on its own?
I mean, certainly
yeah,
without two.
yeah.
Yeah, no one needs two's help. No one's like, I need Doki Doki Panic, but as Mario in my life. Few
You leave
people say
Doki
that.
Doki Panic out of this. Doki Doki Panic is a saint.
I, I love it that we went there, but that's an excellent point that Nate just made because that whole play effect, I almost feel like removes a little bit of seriousness from the whole vibe, right? Like you've got lizard people that are kidnapping women. You've got to do something to kind of pull this back a little bit. And in this game, obviously, it starts off the same way.
Yeah.
Bowser is literally gonna Bowser. There's nothing you can stop with
Mhm.
that. And once again, Princess Peach is getting kidnapped again. Like seriously, at some point here, this is on you. I mean,
I mean, a little bit because you have to wonder why her entire kingdom's like security forces are like 1.5 feet tall with spears that are like 3 times their size, and that's all they have. Maybe we ramp up security just a little bit, bring in some other dudes that are just a bit bigger than a toadstool, and keep this from happening again.
Now the problem is leaving the crank to your drawbridge on the other side of the bridge, and then
Oh,
throwing the
yep,
keys out in front of the door.
yep,
Uh,
hmm
it seems like she's encouraging it.
yep. It's bold strategy there, Cotton. Let's see how it works out for him.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm
I, I do love that there's one thing that a lot of these Mario games tend to do, which is something that Joe and I talked about during the Dawn of the Dead movie review, is that you get to see what things are like before stuff goes to
hmm
shit. And
Yeah.
so you actually get to see the Mushroom Kingdom again. You get to see the castle,
hmm
and I thought it was actually kind of cool to go into the castle again because we saw, like as Nate mentioned, a version of this in Mario 64, and then we get to go into a different looking version
hmm
of it. I mean, what did you guys think getting a chance to walk through the castle again and see their take on it this time?
Well, that was all nice and good, Mark. But one thing that I found very weird is that you have two adults flirting like they're in the 6th grade in this book, where you're like, oh my gosh, this party is too much, Mario. Would you like to come and hang out with me by myself? I suppose, maybe. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah. So Nate, what did you think about being able to go back through Peach's castle and explore the realm, as it were, in a very non oddly sexual comment that I just made?
Well, again, for me, I still think by the time that I started doing that, I was still not buying into the art form a little bit. Again, I thought it was a bold choice at the time. Hadn't played enough of it, but it was one of those things you kind of struggle through a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, I mean, it's just I thought it was cool to see through. There was definitely a different take on it, but it wasn't quite where it wasn't what drew me in the same way. I think what drew me in was more the battle, which is usually
Mm-hmm.
the grind and everything in an RPG, and that part was still sound. Plus the creative elements they had in that battle system. But um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And they do throw you into the mix of a battle pretty quickly because, lo and behold, when everything is looking like it's going fine, Bowser awakes once again from his slumber in his castle or forever where he's been hanging out and makes his way to fight Mario in a very, one for one blow fight before Bowser just pulls up the wand with a star on it and really just puts the nails to Mario. And then it's up to Mario to reawaken the seven sages. I mean, 7 stars to save the
Eh,
day.
but hold on a second. Bowser beats Mario like a tied up goat. Okay, that's just what happens in the very beginning of this game. Mario, he's doing his best. It's kind of like in the
Mm-hmm.
in Mario RPG on the SNES. Like the first battle happens with Bowser and Mario. Things don't
Mm-hmm.
quite go according to plan. But in this one, Bowser is literally invincible. There is nothing you can do.
No,
It's
It is literally like the opening of the Super Mario movie with the penguins fighting Bowser, and they're all like throwing snowballs, having a great time, and like you've tasted but a bit of our wrath. Do you
Yeah.
yield?
Yes.
No, no, I don't.
Absolutely not. But you know what,
Hmm.
though? Bowser has managed to capture the Infinity Stones of this world. There's
Hmm.
7 of them. And Nate, when you said you didn't like the art style, it was a bold choice, or you were maybe against a little bit here. What did you think about when Bowser, yeets Mario from the castle, and then he starts to lifelessly float like a leaf, though, back and forth because he's made of
Again,
paper?
it was a creative element that I thought was kind of funny. Like you just had to kind of laugh. Like it was one of those things where you're like, "Hey, come on, Nate, play along a little bit with this." Like you can kind of enjoy it because you have to understand. Like during this era, the games I were playing when we talk about RPGs were Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9. And so like everything you did was like this big sort of open. Like Mario always brings in the silliness, and that's I think the part that kind
Hmm.
of drew me in a little bit more was that you're not supposed to take this seriously. This isn't someone getting stabbed through the back all of a sudden in some sort of crazy
Hmm.
thing, or all the kids remembering all of a sudden that they knew each other in an orphanage. This is like it's intended, and you can tell like from the setting
Hmm.
of it, and they're keeping it lighthearted. Like it's for the kids, but you can still enjoy it. And after playing all that kind of seriousness, for me, like it was kind of refreshing.
Yeah, and I think that shines through not only in like the story elements, but actually the actual gameplay elements. Because I'd like to hear what you two think as far as like kind of simplicity of combat, and you don't really. I'm not gonna say like a skill tree. You have some options for some power ups as you go along the way,
Mhm.
but as far as like RPG mechanics and think of like JRPGs of the time, RPGs of the time, even modern times. How accessible is the gameplay in this game, or how easy is the gameplay?
I
The way
Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, the way I looked at it was there are aspects of Super Mario RPG that are definitely not meant to be played to just your generic person picking up a controller.
Mhm.
And Nate, I think you probably remember, like there's a hidden boss in Super Mario RPG that will send you with your tail between your legs if you're just a casual person walking into that room.
That was
So
the Square edition to that game, though.
I know,
So
I
Square
know
Enix
it.
refuses to bow down to easy gameplay. Like, no,
absolutely
that's not what
not.
we do.
I think that the idea here was to mainly to distinguish it from Super Mario RPG because they knew they weren't going to be continuing that franchise. So it was here the element was to make it something of its own. Because
Hmm.
I think like from the outset, like you were kind of playing Mario alone for a bit, um, and so it's in a way it wasn't as deep and it was a little more simple and more accessible, and that was okay. Like it was okay. Like it wasn't intending to be the same thing. So
There's definitely less game management to it compared to most RPGs because
mhm.
there's a fairly simplistic level of gameplay where Joe mentioned you might have like a weapon or like the hammer or whatever it might be, and you have the same type of concept from Mario RPG where you can enhance that attack by timing it just right.
Mhm.
Like that carries
Hmm.
over, but most of these fights in the early running at least you don't have to be like a tactics master. Like this isn't the isometric view that Mario RPG gave us, but that horizontal line, and you just kind of fight each other one at a time. Or if you've got like multi-target attacks, you can do that.
Mhm.
So as far as accessibility goes, I agree because for me, this was an easy thing.
Hmm.
Like this was easy for me to get into compared to watching some of the games that Nate played, which frankly require Asian reflexes to be able to be
No,
successful
no,
at.
it requires that you're going to call it that stereotypical grinding and like dedication to like if you're playing
Hmm.
Final Fantasy Tactics, I mean it kills you right from the outset. You're playing that first scenario a couple times till you learn. Like they're going to punish you, almost like it's like
Hmm.
the RPG equivalent of like Dark Souls. It's like we're going to make you pay now, and we're going to make you pay later, and we're going to pay make you pay later after that too. We're never going to make this easy on you. With Mario, it's the learning curve on it just isn't as bad, and I think that's
Hmm.
completely intentional because they've always known who their audience is. When you talk about Super Mario RPG, I mean, you're talking about handing over some of the reins to Square, and yeah, they're going to make it more sophisticated. In some cases, too much so, in some of their
Hmm.
other games. So this was as is with most of their games, a real refreshing change. I mean, they've continued that to this day. I mean, I've been playing Super Mario Wonder, and my kids can play it, and they enjoy it. So
Yeah, and
yeah,
I think that is kind of like part of the or the biggest part of the overall allure to this game is that it is very easy to just pick up and play at almost any age if you're familiar with the controller. I mean, obviously, don't give this to a toddler; they'll be completely lost. But like Mark had also pointed out, losing those that isometric look of Super Mario RPG and making it a little more friendly to anyone to just come and pick up the game. And then, like Nate said, you got that Mario whimsy and charm really makes this stand out. But what do we think are some of the other game mechanics? Because it's not just going around and socking up the Goombas and the bad guys in this game. What are other parts of this game or the mechanics of this game that made this fun to play?
probably the parts with Peach, where you like it would swap off with her every time you progress through the game,
Mm-hmm.
and it would show her like screwing around in the castle, and she's trying to escape whatever else, and every time that she does it, she overhears like Bowser talking about another thing that Mario did, and she gets shoved back over into her room again. Like I always thought that was funny. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm
it's been
happy
a
you
long
called that
time since
out.
I played this. It's coming back to me. Like
No, no, no.
it's like
I'm happy you called that out because the first thing I kind of thought of when I was trying to compare that to something else was how in Sony's Spider-Man game, like I didn't really like playing as Mary Jane Watson when you switch over to her because you've got
Mm-hmm.
crazy superpowered Spider-Man, you're powering up all these skills, and then suddenly you have to go into basically a 100% stealth mission, and it sucks complete ass. But when it comes to this game, when you get to play as Peach, like it is actually kind of fun to be a spy with her.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, though, I really do think they probably need to rename Twink, the little star that talks to her, because
Didn't age well.
a
That's not a.
different
Yep.
connotation now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's like after not having played that in a while, I was like, oh, they called that star
Hmm.
Twink. I,
Whew.
I get why,
Yep.
but
Mm-hmm. Makes
little
sense. However.
yeah, yeah,
Honestly, it might make it more popular now. Now you think about it,
yeah, it could.
that's in now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's in.
It's just back then when I was playing it, didn't think much of it. This day, yeah, nowadays, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But
Right.
to your point, Nate, though, yes, those sequences I don't think are nearly as jarring because each boss, whatever in the game, is treated as a chapter or like an act of this
Mhm.
play that we kind of alluded to before from a function standpoint. So it breaks up the game, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also not to the point where it's like, why is this sequence here? Because the clues that Peach picks up lead you into the next chapter and where you're going. So
Mm-hmm.
it actually serves a reasonable function for once.
Yeah, and you pepper in some relatively light puzzle solving along the way throughout the
Mhm.
game. Something that is just enough to like have a smidgen of a challenge and a big feeling of accomplishment once you've done it to move on about your quest. I think goes a long way for this game.
Well, the light puzzle solving, okay? There's something about this that I really liked compared to like Mario RPG because Nate, if
Mm-hmm.
you remember in Mario RPG, did your companions actually serve a function outside of battle?
Yeah,
In which
they
way?
were like major storyline elements. I mean, all the things with Mallow and his father and Gino and all that kind of stuff. Like they had their own in the pond and all of that, and it's. I mean, it had a much more serious tone to it. I think that's kind of how I looked at this. Is that nothing with Mario and Bowser ever takes that serious of a tone? We know it's silly at this point. We've been playing it forever, and compared to RPG, where RPG was let's make this quite heavy.
Mm-hmm.
As that was it Ricky Gervais and all them would say. It's a
Yes,
bit
yes,
heavy here. Yeah,
yes. Yeah, you're riddled
quite
with AIDS,
heavy.
but I, yeah, but the whole point though from Mario RPG, like yeah, your companions do drive the story, but it's not like you use them to really interact with the world that's non-scripted, right? Like when they do interact with somebody on the map, they like pop out from the side and then they talk to somebody, right?
Hmm.
But in this game, your companions you actually have to use to solve these puzzles. You
Right.
actually have to throw somebody out there as a bomb or to blow a hole in the wall or shoot somebody across like a crevice to hit a button. And that to me was actually it's what kept me in the game. It was varied enough. And Joe, to your point, it's light. It's not meant to
Mm-hmm.
be. It's not meant to be like you're going to need to read a 4-hour guide to get through this. But
Hmm.
still, I thought that was a better immersion tactic, and I don't know if you guys agree with that or not.
Yeah, I mean, again, when you're looking at, like Nate said, like a lot of the primary audience that Nintendo knows that they have is going to be younger children, or just children. So it's kind of the thing that they pull off consistently well with this and with Super Mario Wonder, as Nate also pointed out. They continue to do very well with the Mario games, which goes a long way for them, and like other franchises like Pokemon capitalize on making their games relatively easy and accessible with puzzle solving, simple storylines, going for their younger audiences. Although I would say that Mario does a better job at making it fun to play for older audiences as well as younger audiences than the modern mainstream Pokemon games have done.
When you go with Mario to be your protagonist in something, it can't be taken seriously because nobody would ever. This guy is not going to would ever be a natural protagonist for anything that he's in. He's just he's a golfer now, and now he's a
Mm-hmm.
doing whatever. It's like
He's a
what
doctor.
like now he's a doctor. Oh, he's a doctor.
Yeah.
He's a race
Yeah,
car
why is
driver.
this
It's
man a
like
doctor?
why is he there?
The
And
last
you
person
realize
I
it's
trust is a
because
doctor.
and it kind of that's what always breaks it for you. Is like this guy's basically an actor. He's an actor in everything he's doing. He just thinks he's going to be good at everything, and so we'll just throw him into this box again.
So you're saying he's like that porn star that plays like every profession possible, right? Like Mario should just be Ron Jeremy at this point.
Oh my god, that's a bad visualization because he is slightly overweight Italian man, and I can't
I was
imagine
thinking
him
more because
coming
of
to
his
like
recent health issues.
that can't be great either. But like, can you imagine him coming up to Peach's Castle Stars game and going, "Who ordered the extra large sausage pizza?" No one.
Yep.
Having
That
having
just
met
doesn't
Ron
work.
Jeremy personally and shaking his hand, I can tell he
Oh,
doesn't sound a thing like that at all.
I thought you were going to say shaking. I
Mhm.
really thought you were going to say shaking something else, but now I'm
Oh,
happy.
yep. Hmm.
I'm happy that we've presented the concept of Mario being
Super
hung like a
Mario porn
horse.
star. Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, yes, yes.
I could
Yeah,
play
I was going to
that.
say. Yeah,
It's like
Mario's.
Conker's Bad Fur Day, but for Nintendo.
Yeah, God,
Mhm.
I'm happy we went there. But you know what? One thing I do want to call out really quick was going
Mhm.
back to what Nate mentioned about the Peach sequences here. I feel like this was the idea that they stole and put into the Mario movie, which is Bowser keeping a diary and and writing his daily thoughts in it, which Peach finds, and then you start to find out that like, wow, he's actually a softie. He's got emotions. Like what did you guys think about that?
I thought it was just more
Mhm.
silliness in this game. Like
Yeah, it's right up there with How I Met Your Mother, and you figure out Barney's got a blog, and it's just the end of every Doogie Howser episode with him typing into his computer.
That's right.
It, mhm.
Does he throw the sheet,
yeah,
the extra paper over his head every time he writes a page? I can't remember. Would have been the same
Stephen
era.
Cannell
So
Productions. Yeah,
yes, it, for me, this was part of that attitude that I think kind of it keeps me going. Like you mentioned, there's not too much
Mhm.
seriousness in this, but then you get stuff like this. You get this like random moment like that where it just kind of you just forget everything else going on and going, how could like I'm assuming Bowser's like an 8 foot tall
Mhm.
turtle, and he's sitting there with a quill and feather writing about this stuff. But hey, what whatever. But ultimately, I think we've covered the base of the game. We're obviously not going to go
Mhm.
boss for boss and tell you
Mhm.
everything, but what we are going to do is rate this son of a bitch. And Nate, you haven't actually been on a retro review with us before, so we're going to let you actually have the first metric, which in the realm of GamePro, if you remember those days, they had their scale of 5 and they had certain things that they would rate, right?
you talking about the faces they used to do, where like the guy was like totally buzzed out on like just high on everything when it's a five. He was like,
Mhm.
That's
and if it's
right.
not, he's like this. It was like 0.5. He's like looking down in shame, like
Yep,
Exactly.
like he did
That
something
is
wrong.
exactly that's exactly what we're going for.
pure
Yep.
90s.
So, hey, you know what? That's what
Being
Joe and I were
tweaked is
born.
great.
Yep. Based off of that, we're going to we have 4 different categories that we do. The first one being graphics, and it's out of a possible 5, of which we've mutually agreed to before this episode even started that we're going to base these off of a possible 5-star spirits. So, Nate, as far as the gameplay as far as the graphics of Paper Mario are concerned, what would you give that rating?
I give it a 4. I mean, we're talking about for that era.
Hmm.
Everyone's going to 3D, and I'm not saying they took the shortcut out. It was definitely a creative art style. It wasn't like peak for that era, even for that system. You talk peak for that era, now you're talking your Perfect Darks, and other, those kind of games in that series where they're really pushing the envelope. And I mean, it was okay. I'm just saying, but it wasn't that
Hmm.
kind of stuff. And I know that's a creative art selection, but in the scheme of things, I think that's where you'd place it. It did well for what it was doing, but it's not a
Hmm.
5.
I think it's reasonable because you're comparing it to the class it was with. Like that makes total sense to me. It's not like you're trying to compare it to something that came out last year, right?
Hmm.
So I think it's very reasonable. But Joe, what do you think about the graphics of this game?
I think that the graphics are really, really good for what they're trying to do. Because, like you said, everything's moving to like the 3D era here, and they kind of want to like not forget where Mario came from so much so quickly. So they threw in this idea of like let's keep it 2D, but let's give it a little bit of an extra fun vibe by making it like legitimately paper, so like he behaves like paper when he's slinking into bed or falls from a great distance. It's like a leaf on the wind. You watch him fly, and that just hurts everyone who just heard it. So it was too soon, always too soon for Wash. So it was just enough to make us remember that Mario is supposed to be fun while also having the capabilities of the system that it's actually on. So I'm also going to give this 4 star. I was going to say shrines, and that's wrong. I'm still stuck on um, Tears of the Kingdom. 4 star spirits out of 5 for graphics.
Boom. I'm actually not going to break rank here because I do agree with a lot of what both of you have already stated. I mean, I did play a lot of these other games at the same time, and yes, this was a choice that they deliberately made. But when it does come to the rest of the graphics and how they operate, whether you're going between different perspectives and all that, did exactly what it needed to do. But there's a reason why we're mentioning other games right now with better looks. So I think
Mm-hmm.
4 is a perfect metric to go with on that one. But Nate, when it comes to the gameplay itself, what would you rate that as far as a possible 5-star spirits?
See, this is where it actually worked for me. It was 5. It was a 5. I mean, one thing that is that usually Nintendo games are button up end to end, and this is another good example of that. The gameplay elements were fun. The controls were sound. I had a good time playing it. And I think that really, you know, it overcame all of the other limitations it might have as a game. In that ultimately, what are you playing it for? It was just a fun game to get through. And I mean, I love grinding RPGs too. So it's not as much of a grind, which is always nice. Sometimes to take kind of a break from that, where you're not, destroying 400 or something to get to
Mm-hmm.
what you need. Like it's nice sometimes, especially in the Mario games, just to kind of I just want to play through and have a good time with it. And if I want to come back and really kill it and get other stuff and hunt on all the items, I can, but I don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
Very accessible.
Uh,
Yeah.
Joe, what do you think?
I'm gonna go a little bit lower here, just because I do remember playing this game, and for some characters during combat, or I mean, actually, for all the characters in combat, you can of course time your attack with either pulling the control stick back and then letting it go at the right time, or just hitting I think it's A or B at the right time when characters are jumping to double your damage for many things. And I remember doing well with Mario for his either his hammer or his jump. But I remember as soon as you switch to some of the auxiliary characters, especially our little Goomba friends. Yeah, I always mistimed their jumps when they were trying to go upside, like jump, turn upside down, and then land.
Mm.
I could never get those right, and I don't know if this is. I mean, it's probably a skill issue, but out of spite, I'm going to 4 out of 5 star spirits for
What
gameplay.
I'm hearing here, Joe, is that because I was more skilled than this at you, that you're going to go ahead and rank it one less than I did. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, yes, it's my fault. This
Okay,
game
let's go ahead
sucked
and
a
make
little
this
bit.
clear. Let's make this clear here. I don't want anyone to be confused.
I think this is the first time we've ever had a point deducted for spite and spite alone, but that's okay.
Mhm.
We've got to always have a first for something.
and
Uh,
and and because it's out of spite, we can't take it back.
you can't take it back.
No one
No,
takes it back
You
when it's
can't
out of
take it
spite.
back.
Can't.
Not
no,
pure.
Mm-mm.
no.
Now, if you
That
want to
that
change your mind on that later and take it for some other reason, then
yeah.
you still
Yeah, wow.
we're not going to take it back for that because you've already said spite.
Yeah, exactly. They
See,
know
there
it.
you go.
I could have the receipt. Wouldn't take it back.
No, absolutely not.
Mhm.
I will expand on what you guys mentioned because there are some mechanics that we haven't talked about in this game just yet, and one of them is the concept of the badge. So there are badges that you can purchase
Mm-hmm.
throughout the game, and there's a vendor in like the main town that you go through, and those badges actually cycle and change over time. And so for me, I actually would, if I had the coins, that is, because they are fairly expensive badges to buy, and then
Mm-hmm.
you can find
Mhm.
some. But I thought it was a cool thing to add into familiarity with the Super Mario RPG world because they had certain things that you could, wear as well that were badge-ish that would change some of the functions of your characters.
Bracelets and bangles and all that stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, like Mario and or sorry, Peach like would always get the jewelry in some
Mhm.
capacity because she's not basic. But the badges themselves though were really cool because to Joe's point, there are characters you can't jump on because they have a horn on their helmet and you
Mhm.
need a badge to be able to actually do that. So for me when it comes to the gameplay stuff that you guys have already mentioned, the badges part of it was cool because then once you leveled up, you could put more points into what badges you could purchase and then you can really start to, build Mario in your own non-porn star image. So that was what I really enjoyed, and that's why I'm going to give that a 5 because for
Mhm.
me, the closer that I can get to immersion, the better. All right,
And I believe what that brings us to with graphics, with gameplay, replay. Is that where we're at now?
yeah, we are
There
at
we go.
replay.
Replayability.
Yeah, yeah, Nate. I guess on a scale of ashamed of yourself to possibly tweaking out on illegal drugs, what would you give this rating for replay value?
So as a having played it once through a long time ago and only maybe touched up on it a couple times through emulation, probably about a 4. And the reason I say that is that it's been done again and done again and done again. I mean, you've got the Thousand Year Door, the Origami King since then, which also very fun. I played quite a few hours to those too, and I just haven't felt the need to go back and play it again. I think it's been in the store, for a while too, so
Mhm.
it's accessible. And I think once you do one, you don't mind going back and playing the other one. But compared to some of the other games, I don't think I've gone back to it as much. But it's not because it was terrible. It's just I think it's showing its age a little, for the time. But it's still
Yeah.
fun.
Hmm.
Joe, what do you think?
Yeah. Same page as Nate here. In that it was definitely fun for its time. I can pick it up and play it again and still kind of enjoy myself. And like Nate said, very accessible. I'm sure you can if you've got a local like used game shop, they'll probably sell it to you for like 20-25 bucks. You can also find it on eBay for about that price. So if you're looking like dust off the N64 and you don't own the game, you're able to do so at a pretty easy cost. And if you have a Switch and you have the expansion pack membership, you can play it on the Nintendo 64 emulator for the Switch. So if you've already got that, then that big dick player time, like throwing down that sweet eShop cash for the bigger membership, you can pick it up anytime you feel like it, and it plays pretty close to how it did on the old N64. That being said, I replayed it for the podcast. I haven't really touched the game since I played it on the N64 in high school. And while it is a fun game, I don't really have a desire to go back and play it all too much. So I'm actually going to go lower and give this a 3.5 star spirits out of 5.
See, this is hilarious that you guys both went there because this was the one that I knew I was going to tank the score on,
Mm-hmm.
and it's because there's something about Mario RPG on the SNES that for me is iconic, and I will go back and play it probably once a year. I might go and replay it maybe like every 2 years. But the point is, I have a ton of nostalgia for that game. I love playing it, and I'll go back and revisit it whenever
Mm-hmm.
I feel like. But the same thing happened to me when it came to Paper Mario. Was that yeah, I play that game once every like 2.5, 3 years, and no one really talks about that game. Like I don't really ever share any thoughts about it. So there just isn't enough of a draw for me there, and I don't know if it's because of the difficulty, and maybe it's not as much of a challenge, and it's not as fulfilling from that standpoint. So it's all carbs, guys. There's no protein in this game. So for
Joe, I
that, I'm
want to know
gonna
what game
yeah.
shops you're going to, by the way, to get it for $25. I'm seeing prices of 70 to 100. So we
Really?
need to talk. We need to talk about this.
I could have swore that I saw that going for like in the 20s range when I was looking at picking it up to play again.
You,
Maybe I was just being
Joe
terrible.
might have gone into a time machine and looked at prices before COVID because I mean, gaming prices have only shot up since then.
Yeah,
But
seeing it used
Nate's
on eBay for 26.39.
That's for the cartridge sticker. It's not even for like the. There's like a card you can buy because I'm looking at it going, Paper Mario 75 or best offer ships fast.
well, I guess if
Are
you
you
want the
looking at the
sticker,
Japanese version here?
No, no, I've got Paper
Mario
Mario video
Story.
game cartridge console card for N64.
That's the con. That's the card. That's not the
It's
game.
just the card?
Just the
That's
card.
weird.
that is so
They
strange.
do show the same
Sorry, we
picture of the
interrupted your
cartridge
rating,
over and
Mark.
over
Let's let
again.
Mark finish here. We can
No,
try
no,
to
no.
get in here.
That's okay. I was that's where I was going to go with it, guys. I gave it a 3 out of 5, and that's where it's going to go because it's just not one of those games that is iconic for me. I like it. It's a great game, but as far as replay value goes, there's only so much that can draw you back to this. You either have the nostalgia or you don't. Maybe if it's your first time, you might think differently. But we do come to the last metric here that we rate based off of, and this metric, Nate, believe it or not, has actually killed some games that might have been in the top running, which is the music of the game itself. So as far as the game goes, Nate, what do you think about that? What do you think about the music? Why don't you have a seat?
Do you have a seat over here?
We go
It's
back to that.
whimsical. I mean, it's whimsical enough. It fits the atmosphere. It's not going to be. It's not like moving sequence. Final Fantasy VII opening glory or something made on that SC88 synthesizer, but it's a 3. It's probably a 3.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Yeah.
nothing that you could remember by name, right? Like you didn't go that far because you liked it that much. Because I know you like music from video games, but this
I
one
hummed it to
didn't.
my children. I hum it to my children when they were trying to sleep as babies, and I put them to sleep. I never once hummed a Paper Mario song to my kids.
No, he was humming "Where the Hood At" by DMX. Rest in peace. But Joe, what about you, man? What are your
Uh,
music thoughts?
I mean, like it's pretty standard Mario music, man. When I say standard, it's not even like they said there is some memorable Mario tracks out there. Um, but like you hear it and you're like, yeah, it's a Mario game. You're not going to question it, but nothing's sticking out. Um, like battle music is fine. It's fine in that like it's rarely ever intimidating. Like even with boss battles, there's still a good amount of play and whimsy to it where it doesn't seem like the stakes are all that high. So it doesn't necessarily take you out of the game, but it doesn't really like make the game just go, fantastic. So I'm at three, three for music on it. Mm-hmm.
There's no possibility for me to give this thing anything higher than a 2.5. Mostly because I can't really remember any of the music from this game, even though I played it somewhat consistently. I played it again for the podcast too. Still can't think of a whole lot from it. But the reason why I'm not going to like tank it down to a 1 is because in Mario RPG, I still have PTSD from the combat music, which Nate, if you remember, it's the and I'm like,
Can hear it in my dreams.
yes, seriously. Sometimes when I'm in like a quiet room and I'm by myself and I just have my thoughts, that slowly creeps back in again, and I'm like, God damn it, I've heard that song too
Pulling
many
up to the
times.
drive-through window. If they were started playing that, I would just like go into a shell.
Oh.
Yeah, seriously, like that. So that didn't happen for me on Mario, Paper Mario. It did with RPG, but yeah, it fits. It does what it's supposed to do. But Joe, to your point, it's like, yep, it's music.
Mhm.
It's a game. So there's, I
mean,
can't,
it's a
I
game.
can't.
Is what you
It's a
mean.
game. Yeah,
It's a
I
game.
can't.
Mhm.
But I can't. I literally can't add any flair. I can't even lie about this rating. Like I just do not know enough about the music. So to me, if it's not memorable enough, that's why we're rating it that way. However, that does bring us to our final tally, which should shock no one that actually understands maths.
Mhm.
This game gets a 75% from this panel, which really isn't a bad rating. However, that does leave it within the bottom 3 games that we've ever rated on this program. So What do you guys think about that? What do you think about that overall?
I think you need to rate some other games. We need to get and do like Thrill Kill or
Throw Kill wasn't even released. I mean, how can we rate a game that wasn't
you can
released?
rate
Nate?
a game that hasn't been released, Mark. You can totally do it. It needed a review.
We could go on a string of known bad game reviews and
There
say,
you go.
no, we're going
Superman
to play a game
64.
that everyone knows sucks. And
Yeah,
then we
Superman
can
64.
really move this into the middle of the pack. I mean, I have that game. I'm willing to play it and talk about it and relive like the just pointlessness of flying through hoops to save the day.
I mean, Joe, that's how America was won, man. That's how we built this country,
Just
flying through loops. Yeah,
The veterans did it.
totally. They built those rings, man. But
Yep.
I,
That's how
I'm
Dad
not
did it.
shocked.
That's how America does it.
Yes. That's right. That's right. It's not how many times you have to fire the weapon. It's all about the weapon you only have to fire once,
There we
which
go. Mm-hmm.
which unfortunately is not the case with this game. It's not really the one that you even need to fire once. I think you only need to fire it once like every 3 or 4 years. It's just not going to bring you back.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think it occupies the space in the Mario catalog of games. Is like let's get an RPG here. They've done other ones too, like Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. They've done a few of those other kind of like that they've touched there. But there's a reason why they're coming out. What just came out with a remake of Super Mario RPG. Like everyone knows for all time that's the iconic Mario RPG. It was that way. And Paper Mario's its own thing. Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
Not the best, and we all know that.
Yeah, so it wasn't like the hierarchy of RPG games was about to change when Paper Mario came out.
No. I mean, we have at the very top we have Chrono Trigger,
Mm-hmm.
can't be touched, and then there's subtle layers as we make our way down.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Paper Mario is like the option to either dry your hands with paper towel or to use the fan function, and like everybody wants to use the paper towels first. You're like, ah, shit, they ran out. And then you put your hands in that like germ, center, and it's like it's the best way I can really think about this game at this point. But either way, folks, we hope that you enjoyed this latest retro review because we do have to shut this thing off at some point. But with that, we do thank you for listening to Digital Dissection. As always, we appreciate everything the Dissection crew does for us week after week. Your support does go a very long way. And if you happen upon this show by accident, why not drop us a review or comment on the show?
We also love hearing from you, so feel free to shoot us a message over at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com. We welcome all of your emails and suggestions for future shows, whatever they may be, or, anything else you'd like to discuss.
And until next time, keep on dissecting.
You guys think Portillo's is still open?